What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here. I'm back from my holiday and it feels great to be writing a script again. I honestly missed it. And this is a topic that I've been wanting to talk about for probably over a year now, and it seems like the perfect time to make this video. This video won't be heavily edited, so if you just want to sit back and listen, then feel free. So I recently put out a video talking about the power level changes coming in the next episode and how pissed off I am about it. Bungie made the announcement in the TWAB this month and the community was mostly pretty angered about it. But some did defend the change, saying they like chasing power level as it gives them something to do. And that is what this whole video was centered around. Various times in the past when players have wished for something only for Bungie to deliver on it, and then they complain about the change even though they were once advocating for it. If you haven't heard of the Monkey's Paw, basically it is similar to the Ahamkara, aka the Wish Dragons. Essentially, it's when you wish for something and get it, but it's implemented in a way that is not necessarily what the wishing person intended. Hence the thumbnail about being careful what you wish for. The most famous example being King Midas, where everything he touched turned to gold, but then he couldn't eat or touch anything. Imagine hugging your loved ones and they crumble into gold. That'd be truly awful. I do want to say one thing that is very important, and that is that Bungie is clearly listening. I made a video talking about the many great quality of life changes they brought to Destiny in the last couple years and why the game on a fundamental level is a really good video game. So that we're listening meme is actually 100% true, but they can't always deliver what you want, and in truth, a lot of people don't actually know what they really want or how it will look in practice. And game dev takes a lot of time, so sometimes by the time the change is made, the players who wanted it most have quit the game, or the game has evolved to a point where that change now no longer matters or seems insignificant or can actually be a detriment. So let's talk about some of the changes that came into Destiny that many people in the community wished for, but then when it was actually brought into the game, they grew to lament it. So I already touched on the power level point and I made a video ranting about it, but let's start there because it is also relevant to the topic of this video. Now, back in the day, like the first 2 or 3 years of Destiny 2, I honestly loved the power grind. Way back then, there wasn't even a pinnacle cap, but just a hard cap. But the best way to reach it was by doing endgame stuff like the Last Wish raid or hard challenges on the Dreaming City. It was really cool, and you could feel yourself getting stronger. When you first stepped into the Dreaming City, everything was powerful and a true threat, and as you grew in power, you could start to overcome the endgame activities on that destination. Then, over time, power level evolved and we got pinnacle caps, which was originally designed for only the top players to reach. Pinnacles were only a +1 and dropped from a few sources, but then Bungie raised them to +2, which was a great change because without drop protection, +1 increases were far too fickle. But then they increased the total sources of pinnacles, so the endgame grind that it was designed around became less of a pinnacle achievement, as if you waited long enough and min-maxed and had good RNG, you could just reach it through basic core playlist activities and Hawthorne rewards. But back in the day, I actually liked this chase. Every season, I was able to min-max like crazy and reach pinnacle cap usually within the first few weeks. It was fun for me. But as the game has evolved and Bungie has brought in power caps to pretty much every piece of content, power level no longer matters. It's an archaic system built around a version of the game that no longer exists, and as such, I'm pretty pissed about even having to engage with it. I say all this to illustrate that as time goes on, our opinions and desires morph and change. What we wanted a few years ago no longer matters, or conversely, we don't even want it anymore. I used to love the pinnacle cap grind, and now I am not sure I'm even going to bother with it in the next episode because it's just a colossal waste of time. I honestly just can't be bothered. Next up is the topic of expansions versus seasons versus episodes. So back in the D1 days, we would get these huge meaty expansions with so much content to play, but eventually as time went on and you completed all the content, the game would go into a bit of a drought. There was little added to the game in between expansions, so the Destiny community was starved for content. In D2, we got small expansions in the first year, and then Bungie shifted to a seasonal model while keeping the big expansions. This was a nice change, as there were small content drops throughout the year to give players content to play and new loot to chase. This kept players on the Destiny treadmill and introduced FOMO to the game, as if you didn't play the seasons when they were out, then they were lost to time. This obviously made some people mad, as no human likes to feel forced to do anything, and this model definitely made it feel like you had to be engaging with Destiny very often, so you never really got a break. Where with the big expansions like Taken King or Forsaken, you could play a ton of the game and then quit the game for a while and come back hungry when new content dropped. This was a nice model for players, I think, but Bungie evolved with the times and live service games became cash cows, and as such, they wanted you playing every week. So with the expansion model, it allowed them to make really good replayable content that players would engage with a lot until they tired out and then moved on. Where with the seasonal model, they made surface level activities with not much depth or engagement, and then time gated your progression so that you couldn't play it all at once. So this kept you coming back week over week, but the time gating is what forced you to engage with the content rather than playing it because it was fun and you wanted to play it. For me as a content creator, the drop fed stuff is really good for YouTube because you always have something to play and cover, but overall, I think the big expansions are way more fun. Forsaken is literally peak Destiny, but all that is to say is that the seasonal model, in part, was developed because many people wished for a more spaced out content distribution that they could interact with on a regular basis, rather than an overload of content that would keep them extremely busy for a while, but then when it had been played and completed, the game sort of dried up unless they just wanted to challenge themselves in other ways like low mans or speedruns and such. Over time, seasons definitely ran their course and became very formulaic, and Bungie said they were switching things up with episodes. But if Echoes is any indication, episodes are just a new way to time gate us to hell. Now, instead of finishing a season in 9 weeks or so, we finish an episode in 9 weeks, but it's spread out over the course of 16 weeks thanks to artificial time gates between acts. Yes, acts do bring new gameplay elements with new artifact mods to give us different ways to play, but overall, they are completely the same as seasons with more bullshit time gating, and I hate it and I will call it out every chance I get. Sincerely, fuck time gating. Another huge one is intrinsic champion stunning. Champions were introduced as a way to increase the difficulty of nightfalls and also limit your loadout by needing to run certain weapons to deal with champions. And the tough thing about this was early on, these weapons were all primaries, and only Ariana's Vow existed as an exotic to handle barrier champs. The community complained about the lock and key method of this approach. How Bungie artificially created difficulty by introducing a lock, aka the champions, that had very limited keys, aka anti-champion weapons, that could counter it. On top of this, these mods had to be equipped on our armor, which limited the mods that we could use, especially on our gloves. So fast forward to Lightfall, they introduced intrinsic champion stunning, meaning our subclass verbs had the ability to stun champions. This opened up the sandbox tremendously. And they also made it so that the artifact was now active in the background, meaning we could use more mods on our armor. This was a super welcome change to basically all players. But as time went on and we got to play with the changes, it was discovered that this accelerated the power creep in Destiny massively. Now we could use our strongest weapons and just rely on abilities to stun champions. For most players, this is definitely a positive change, and I do like it too. But you can't deny that the game has become far easier since this change was introduced. And speaking of the mods on our armor, another change that Bungie implemented was streamlining the mods in Destiny. We used to have tons of mods in Destiny. I made a video breaking down every one, and it is an hour and 40 minutes long. This was awesome for build variety and player expression, but horrible for new players trying to grasp what the hell these mods even did. So Bungie simplified the mod system. This made build crafting far easier to learn and understand, but it also removed a lot of the build crafting skill gap for hardcore players, and also made builds much more homogenized. You used to be able to play in so many different ways. Charge with Light, Elemental Wells, Warmind Cells, these all offered different and unique play styles, where with the new mod system, you basically have two categories, weapon damage focused builds or ability spam focused builds. So while the system is certainly now far easier to grasp and easier to take advantage of as a whole, we did lose a lot of depth to the build crafting system. And one more on the Sandbox front was the move from Subclass 2.0 to 3.0. Now I love the customization of Subclass 3.0 as it allows you to create the perfect build for any scenario. But as many in the community have pointed out, it also really made classes lose their identity, specifically Warlocks. From Arc, Warlocks lost their Arc webs, and Hunters and Titans gained the ability to apply Jolt. For Solar Warlocks, they were the ones with the access to healing grenades, giving them a unique support role that they could play, but now every class has access to every grenade. And for Void, the incredibly strong Devour Warlock now had to share one of the strongest verbs in the game with Hunters and Titans. But the other classes weren't immune either. Hunters are still the king of Invis, but now every class can do it in some way. And as for Titans, well, I'm honestly not sure. They're still the only ones who can make sunspots, and they still punch incredibly hard. So yeah, maybe Subclass 3.0 was just totally beneficial for Titans. These were definitely smaller complaints than some of the others, but they were still addressing player feedback. The lock and key champion situation was a big topic, but mods were a bit less divisive, and the subclass topic wasn't too big of a deal if I recall. I think most of the people liked the D2 OG system with the nodes, but there were definitely some who wished for customization like we had in D1. And then we did get that customization, and it's made our Guardians stronger than ever, for better or worse. Now for a really hot button issue, and that is weapon crafting. A lot of people wish for it as a means of curbing bad RNG, and the initial design back in Witch Queen when it was implemented was that way. There were tons of annoying resources that you had to have, but basically it was like if you wanted Kill Clip as a perk, you had to have had that perk drop and extract the resource that would allow you to put it on your crafted weapon. So you couldn't just craft at will, but the reasoning for this was so that you had to earn many of that type of weapon to have access to its perks. Otherwise, you could just craft a straight up god roll. So they put provisions in place to prevent that. On top of that, the red border system fucking sucked at the time because you had to level up a red border to extract resonance, and yeah, it led to a lot of Shuro Chi farming to extract the resources, which was not fun gameplay at all. But again, this was a way for Bungie to keep you from just crafting away. And finally, you had to also unlock the pattern, which back when crafting launched took a ton of time. You had to get lucky with RNG, and red border drops were quite rare. So again, this was to keep it as it was originally designed, as a way to curb bad RNG. We weren't supposed to craft god rolls. We were supposed to earn god rolls with random drops, like Destiny has always been. But if you really wanted a gun with a certain roll and you grinded out roll after roll and never got that, then eventually you would be able to craft it because you earned so many in the past and extracted the perk resources in the red borders. So if you didn't already have the god roll, well, now you could make it. And then when you crafted it, you had to level it up to unlock the perks. This was done by getting kills with it, and then eventually you also got progress for completing activities with a crafted weapon as well. I remember playing Iron Banner and swapping my weapons right before the game ended for some easy progress. But the point is, you had to use the gun to level it up. Now the way they implemented it was far from perfect. Destiny has so many useless and annoying resources to keep track of, and this made it much worse. And leveling random weapons at Shuro Chi was just unfun so that you could get resources. But again, these roadblocks were put in place with good intentions. They were there to keep crafting as a means of RNG protection, rather than as a way to make a 5 out of 5 god roll whenever you pleased on basically any weapon you wanted. So naturally, the community bitched, and don't get me wrong, some of the complaints were absolutely warranted. So eventually, Bungie streamlined the system. They made it so that only red borders would drop on craftable weapons because before you could get red borders on any weapon, and then they also made it so you could extract the resonance right away with no need to level it up at Shuro Chi. And yes, I know you could level it anywhere, but most hardcore players did Shuro Chi because it was the quickest and most efficient. This was a nice change as it reduced some of the crafting grind. And I remember in Season of the Plunder, red border drop rates were still pretty shit, and they would time gate you when you could earn your weekly red border. This frustrated players as by this point they just wanted to get their red borders to unlock the pattern so that they could be done with the season. So then after this, Bungie responded to more community feedback and increased red border drop rates. So now it was easier than ever to unlock red border weapons to earn the patterns. And eventually, around Season of the Witch, they introduced deep sight harmonizers so you could just make a weapon that you got to drop into a red border, making it even easier. However, deep sight harmonizers did have a limit of 1, but now I believe you can hold up to 5. So now, basically at the start of a season, you can just get a few drops, use deep sight harmonizers, and boom, you have a craftable weapon in like 20 minutes. And somewhere along the way, they also added the ability to just pay resources to level up your crafted weapons. So now you could get the pattern quickly thanks to them removing restrictions and increasing red border drop rates, not to mention allowing you to focus a red border of your choosing earlier on in the season. And then when you crafted it, you didn't have to go to Shuro Chi or play with it a ton to unlock the best perks. You could just level it up immediately to level 17, then craft it with double enhanced perks, and boom, you have a 5 out of 5 god roll right away. And Ascendant Alloy drop rates were also increased, so now you didn't have to grind for these as hard. And they increased the cap on them so you could hold more. So now we are in a situation today where the pendulum has completely swung the other way. Now players bitch about there being no grind anymore and how god rolls are handed out for free. But the reason it's like this is because players bitched for years about crafted weapons being too grindy. They just wanted to be able to unlock the red borders more quickly so they could check it off their seasonal to-do list. In my opinion, I like crafting for a few reasons, the biggest being it's a huge vault space saver. If Bungie would give us 10,000 slots, then I would say sure, abolish weapon crafting. But I like to do niche builds and have a certain weapon for every scenario. Like if Anti-Barrier Auto Rifle is up that season, I want an auto with Disruption Break so my kinetic special can hit for 50% more damage when I break a barrier champion's shield. And it is nice to know that I can craft just that if such a scenario arrives. So for me, I use it as a means to know I can craft what I need for a certain scenario. I have 3 Apex Predators and I use them all. One with Reconstruction Bipod for utility, one with Explosive Light for solo GMs where I can always have Explosive Light up, and another with Bait and Switch for boss DPS rotations. Funnily enough, when I was grinding out the red borders, I had all those rolls drop, and 2 of them I still don't have crafted, I just use the drop version. This is what Bungie intended, to get the roll while you are pursuing the pattern, and if you get unlucky and don't get it, then they will allow you to craft it. I got the bait and switch roll too, but I wanted impact casing because it's just better, and also because of enhanced perks. This was Bungie's fatal flaw when introducing weapon crafting. It didn't matter if you got a 5 out of 5 god roll to drop while farming for the pattern, because it could never be as good as a crafted version with enhanced perks. They've since worked to correct this by allowing us to enhance perks on certain weapons, and I think this is a wonderful change. If they'd implemented this alongside crafting in Witch Queen, crafting may be viewed very differently today. Or if crafted weapons could only have base perks, but you could enhance the random drops, then there would be a trade-off. Well shit, I don't have impact casing or handling masterwork on this, but I do have enhanced reconstruction, so I guess I will keep the random drop and enhance it, rather than use a crafted one without enhanced perks. Just some food for thought. I do really like that they made it so we can enhance random drops now though. I kept an Adept Forbearance just because I like Adepts, and my Cataclysmic I never crafted because I got the God Roll as a random drop, so I thought it was a cool flex. Even though I know full well it isn't as good as if it had Enhanced 4th times and Enhanced Bait and Switch, but I digress. The point of all of this though is to show that Bungie is listening, and it is by responding to community feedback that we now have the current version of weapon crafting that we do, where it is literally just doing a checklist to get your red borders, and then being able to craft the God Roll that you want. But 2.5 years ago when it launched, that was not the purpose of it. It was to curb bad RNG for players who really wanted a certain roll on a certain weapon but never got blessed by RNGesus to get it to drop. This is just one instance of how the game has definitely become more casual over the years, and how by trying to please the community, you can actually create unintended consequences. And now we have players saying they want grind back in Destiny, and how weapon crafting has totally killed any loot pursuit we have in Destiny. I can absolutely see both sides to this argument, but as someone with a full vault of God Roll weapons and armor, I play Destiny more for the gameplay than for the loot, but to each their own. So to recap, some of the wishes we have had have been no more power level grind, the debate over whether one big yearly expansion is better than seasons with drip-fed content, and now we will soon be debating if we want seasons instead of episodes. And in the future, they are going to do 2 moderate-sized expansions per year, so it will be interesting to see how this one plays out over time. Then we had the changes to champion stunning capabilities, from being locked to certain primary weapons to now being able to use a myriad of exotics or abilities which give you intrinsic stunning capabilities. It certainly opened up build flexibility, but it also gave us huge power creep. The removal of niche and specific mods for a more broad and easy to understand mod system that is very watered down, and then the change to Subclass 3.0. It opened up new and powerful builds while removing class identity. And now the biggest one being talked about, weapon crafting. What was originally introduced as a long-term pursuit to mitigate especially bad RNG has turned into nothing more than a checklist to do every season. I didn't touch on sunsetting, but that one has had some revisionist history. It was mostly disliked at the time, but a lot of people talk about how it could have been a good thing if implemented properly, and I actually agree. See, when it occurred, we lost many fan-favorite weapons, but there were very few weapons in Beyond Light to replace our favored weapons, which created a lot of animosity. The biggest slap in the face was earning a Long Shadow sniper rifle during the campaign when our old Long Shadows had been sunset. Also, sunsetting armor was just dumb as hell, and after many years, sunsetting was even walked back in the final shape. But yeah, the implementation was the horrible part, not the idea. Had we had enough stuff worthy of chasing, I don't think this would have been as hated as it was. But that's just the loot side. As for the discussion around losing content that we paid for, that definitely also sucks. We can no longer play D2 Vanilla or Forsaken, which is basically my favorite time in Destiny. That's the way things go, I guess. Now for the final point that is floating around the community a lot right now, and that is the wish for Destiny 3. All the other ones I have mentioned in this video have been wishes of the community that have been addressed. But this is a wish that is still in the making, and I don't know the right answer. But my hot take is this: Destiny would have to change substantially for Destiny 3 to be worth making. Simply giving us more Destiny with a new number behind it is not going to fix the problems we currently have in the game. I do think it would get a lot more people playing the game because the onboarding experience for Destiny 2 sucks and keeps a lot of people from picking it up. So you would get an influx of new players for sure, and some may stick around, but it isn't going to solve any problems if it is just more of the same. The power creep and the lack of meaningful challenge would still be there, and as for loot pursuit, do we really want to chase our 4th Outbreak perfected in Destiny 3? I don't think so. And we have so many fun and awesome exotics and different ways to play right now, I don't see how a D3 would come close to matching the amount of fun loot we have at our disposal right now. Not to mention, Bungie has pretty much gone 0 for 2 on Destiny launches. D1 and D2 vanilla were not great at launch, despite what your rose-tinted nostalgia-heavy point of view may remember. So D3 would really have to bring it, especially in an era where big games can flop, and even great games fall off quickly because the current generation of gamers need new shiny things dangled in their face every second or they lose interest. So personally, I don't think D3 is the answer. I honestly think Destiny's best days are behind it and it's kind of ran its course. At least if you're a player who has been there since the beginning. After 10 years, there is very little they can offer us to surprise us or get us hyped. So if D3 did change up the formula drastically, then you may piss off your existing hardcore fan base. But if they keep things same old, people will definitely complain that it's too samey. So what is the answer? Well, that's a $1 billion question. And that is why you must be careful what you wish for. Anyways, that's it for the video. If you're still here, thanks so much for watching. Do me a solid and like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe for more Destiny 2 content. I appreciate you watching to the end if you made it this far. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.